Welcome to Mildly Interesting and Sleepy, a little corner of the night for stories that are not urgent, not loud, and not trying to win an argument with your nervous system. Tonight, we are going to wander through the philosophy of Baruch Spinoza as though it were a quiet room lit by a single candle. A lens grinder's table, a few letters folded carefully, a window looking out on a damp Dutch street, and a mind trying to understand the whole universe without shouting at it. This is not a school exam. There will be no quiz at the end. You do not need to remember every definition, every proposition, or every disagreement between philosophers. If your mind drifts, that is perfectly fine. In fact, drifting is part of the design. Spinoza's thought can be precise, almost geometric, but tonight it can also become a calm path through nature, freedom, desire, and the strange peace of seeing things as part of a larger order. So get comfortable. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench. If you are lying down, let the bed hold you like a patient old book. And if your eyes begin to close before we reach substance, before God or nature, before the quiet courage of a man who chose thought over approval, then the story has done exactly what it came here to do. Now we come to Amsterdam in the 17th century, not as a sharp chapter title, but as a room we enter quietly. The city was busy, damp, commercial, crowded with ships, ledgers, languages, merchants, refugees, printers, rabbis, preachers, and people trying to make a life beside canals that held the reflected light of windows at night. Amsterdam was a place of trade, but also a place of ideas. Books moved through it. Arguments moved through it. People who had been pushed from one country to another carried with them memories, prayers, habits, fears, recipes, songs, and questions. Into this world, in 1632, Baruch Spinoza was born. His family belonged to the Portuguese Jewish community, a community shaped by exile and return, by secrecy and survival. Many Portuguese Jews in Amsterdam had ancestors who had lived under pressure in Iberia, where Jewish life had been restricted or punished, and where some families had outwardly converted to Christianity while privately keeping older traditions alive. In Amsterdam, they could breathe more freely, but freedom was never simple. A community that has survived danger often becomes careful. It builds rules, it protects itself, it watches the borders of belonging. Spinoza was known first as Bento or Baruch, depending on the language of the moment. Even his name seemed to stand at a crossing of worlds. Bento in Portuguese, Baruch in Hebrew, Benedictus in Latin. Each name means blessed. There is something quietly beautiful in that. A boy whose name means blessed would one day be cursed by his own community, and yet his life would continue, not as a thunderclap, but as a candle that refused to go out. As a young man, Spinoza learned Hebrew, scripture, rabbinic commentary, and the traditions of his people. He also encountered Latin, philosophy, mathematics, and the new scientific spirit moving across Europe. The 17th century was a time when old certainties were being loosened. Telescopes had changed the sky. Microscopes had changed the small world. Descartes had changed the way many people thought about mind, body, certainty, and method. The universe was beginning to feel less like a small, human-centered stage and more like a vast order of causes, motions, laws, and hidden structures. For some people, this was frightening. For others, it was intoxicating. For Spinoza, it became a path. We can imagine him as a young man listening, reading, thinking, and noticing that the answers he had inherited did not entirely satisfy him. Not because he wanted chaos, not because he wanted to provoke people for sport. Spinoza does not feel, across the centuries, like a man addicted to drama. He feels more like someone who could not unknow what he had begun to understand. Some minds are restless because they want attention. Others are restless because they want peace, but only the kind of peace that can survive honesty. His questions grew dangerous. He questioned traditional views of Scripture. He questioned the idea of a personal God who chooses, commands, rewards, punishes, becomes angry, changes his mind, or intervenes in nature like a king reaching into a machine. He questioned the immortality of the soul in the ordinary religious sense. He questioned the idea that human beings stand outside nature, as if we were little kingdoms floating above the world instead of expressions within it. In 1656, when Spinoza was still young, the Portuguese Jewish community of Amsterdam issued a cherem against him, a formal ban or excommunication. The language of the ban was severe. It cut him off from the community, forbidding others from speaking with him, reading his writings, or coming near him. The details behind it remain partly shadowed. We do not have every private conversation, every accusation, every moment of tension. History gives us fragments, and the fragments tell us enough. Spinoza had become too dangerous to the order his community was trying to preserve. And yet, after this rupture, there is no great revenge scene, no theatrical collapse, no wild public campaign. Spinoza did something quieter and in its own way more radical. He continued to think. He lived modestly. He never became wealthy. He earned money partly by grinding lenses, a precise and delicate craft. Lenses were important in an age of microscopes and telescopes, when human sight was being extended into the very small and the very distant. There is almost too perfect a metaphor here, but it is worth letting it rest gently. Spinoza made lenses for the eyes and philosophy for the mind. Both were ways of improving vision. Both required patience. Both required polish. Both could be ruined by haste. Lens grinding also carried danger. Fine glass dust could damage the lungs, and Spinoza's health was fragile. One can picture him at a table, working carefully, surrounded by tools, cloth, glass, and quiet concentration. Outside, the world argued. Inside, a man shaped instruments of seeing. Spinoza's great work, The Ethics, is one of the strangest and most beautiful books in philosophy. It does not read like a diary, a sermon, or a conversation. It is written in a geometric style, with definitions, axioms, propositions, demonstrations, corollaries, and scholia. It borrows the mood of Euclid, as if the human heart could be studied with the same seriousness as triangles and circles. To modern readers, this can feel cold at first, almost forbidding. But beneath the geometric surface, The Ethics is not cold. It is a book about bondage and freedom, confusion and clarity, sadness and joy, fear and peace. It is a book about how to live without lying to oneself about what reality is. The center of Spinoza's philosophy is his idea of substance. This is one of those words that can sound dry, like something stored in a cabinet. But for Spinoza, substance means something enormous. It means what exists in itself and is understood through itself. It does not depend on anything else in order to be. It is not a thing among other things. It is the deep reality of all things. Most of us look around and see separate objects: a chair, a cup, a body, a tree, a cloud, a city, a star. We also imagine ourselves as separate. Here is me. There is the world. Here is my mind. There is my body. Here is God, perhaps far away. There is nature down here below. Spinoza asks us to slow down and look again. For him, there cannot be many independent substances. There cannot be one ultimate reality over here and another ultimate reality over there, each completely self-sufficient. If something truly exists in itself, without depending on anything else, then it must be infinite. It cannot be limited by another thing of the same kind. And if it is infinite, nothing can stand outside it. There is, finally, only one substance. Spinoza calls this one substance God or nature. Deus sive natura, God or nature. Not God and nature as two things placed side by side. God or nature as two names for the one infinite reality. This is where many readers either wake up suddenly or begin to drift pleasantly into metaphysical fog, and both reactions are acceptable. Spinoza's God is not the familiar personal God of many religions. Spinoza's God does not sit outside the universe designing it like a carpenter designing a chair. Spinoza's God is not a ruler who decides today to send rain, tomorrow to stop a war, the next day to reward a prayer. Spinoza's God is the infinite, necessary, eternal reality of which everything is an expression. The stones, the rivers, the planets, the insects, the human mind, the body asleep under a blanket, the candle flame, the old Dutch street, the sorrow you felt years ago, the thought you are having now, the stars burning beyond sight. All of it exists in God or nature. Not as decorations added to God, but as modes, as particular expressions of the one substance. A wave is not separate from the ocean, though it has its own shape for a while. A sunbeam is not separate from the sun, though it touches the floor in a particular place. A note is not separate from the music, though it can be heard distinctly for a moment. In a similar way, for Spinoza, each thing is real, particular, and meaningful, but not independent from the whole order of reality. This can sound mystical, but Spinoza was not asking people to abandon reason. In fact, he wanted the opposite. He wanted a clear understanding of our place in nature. He wanted to remove superstition, fear, and confusion. He wanted to show that everything follows from the nature of God or nature with necessity. Nothing is random in the deepest sense. Nothing floats free from causes. Everything that exists, exists because it follows from the order of reality. This brings us to one of the most difficult and strangely calming parts of Spinoza: necessity. For Spinoza, everything has a cause, and that cause has a cause, and that cause has another cause, stretching outward into the whole fabric of nature. We often imagine ourselves as free because we are conscious of our desires, but ignorant of the causes that produce them. A stone, if it were conscious while flying through the air, might imagine it was freely choosing its path. It would feel its motion from the inside. It might say, "I am going this way because I want to." But from the outside, we would see gravity, force, impact, angle, and motion. Spinoza thinks human beings are often like that stone. We know what we want, but we do not fully know why we want it. We know we are angry, but not all the causes that formed the anger. We know we are jealous, afraid, hopeful, hungry, ambitious, ashamed, tender, restless, attached, or lonely, but we rarely see the entire chain of causes behind these states. We feel free because we experience desire, but desire itself has a history. This may sound bleak at first. If everything is caused, where is freedom? If our feelings arise from nature, where is responsibility? If even our decisions belong to the order of causes, are we only leaves in a river? Spinoza's answer is subtle. Freedom does not mean being uncaused. Nothing is uncaused. Freedom means understanding necessity. Freedom means becoming more active and less passive. It means being guided more by adequate ideas, clear understanding, and the power of our own nature, rather than being dragged around by confused emotions and external forces we do not understand. To be free is not to float outside nature. To be free is to understand that you are nature and to live from that understanding. Here Spinoza turns toward the human mind and body. Descartes, before him, had sharply separated mind and body. Mind as thinking substance, body as extended substance. Spinoza disagreed. For him, mind and body are not two separate things awkwardly stitched together. They are two ways of understanding the same thing. The body is the human being understood under the attribute of extension. The mind is the idea of the body understood under the attribute of thought. This is dense, yes. It is almost proudly dense. But the gentle version is this: your mind is not a ghost trapped inside a machine. Your body is not a mere container for the true self. Mind and body are parallel expressions of one reality. What happens in the body corresponds to what happens in the mind, not because one magically pushes the other around, but because they are two aspects of the same underlying order. This is one reason Spinoza can feel surprisingly modern. He does not ask us to hate the body, flee the body, punish the body, or imagine ourselves as pure spirits temporarily inconvenienced by flesh. He invites us to understand ourselves as embodied beings. Our thinking is connected with our living. Our emotions are not moral stains dropped from nowhere. They are changes in our power of existing. And now we come to desire. For Spinoza, desire is not a small, embarrassing appetite hiding in the corner of human life. Desire is central. He says that desire is the very essence of human beings, insofar as we are determined to act in ways that preserve and enhance our existence. Every being strives to persevere in its being. This striving is called conatus. A tree bends toward light. A body seeks food and rest. A mind seeks understanding. A frightened person seeks safety. A lonely person seeks contact. A wounded person seeks repair. A child reaches for warmth. A city builds walls. A philosopher writes carefully. Every finite thing in its own way tries to continue to express its power to remain in existence. In human beings, this striving appears as desire. We do not desire something because we judge it good, Spinoza says. Rather, we judge something good because we desire it. This reverses a common assumption. We like to imagine that value stands outside us, calm and objective, and then our desire politely follows. Spinoza says the movement is often the other way around. Desire comes first. Then the mind names the desired object good. This is not a cynical thought. It is clarifying. It helps explain why people can disagree so intensely about what is good, beautiful, offensive, sacred, necessary, or foolish. Each person is shaped by a different pattern of causes, memories, bodily states, fears, hopes, and forms of life. We do not look at the world from nowhere. We look from somewhere. Spinoza then describes emotions, or affects, with remarkable care. Joy is an increase in our power of acting. Sadness is a decrease in our power of acting. Love is joy accompanied by the idea of an external cause. Hatred is sadness accompanied by the idea of an external cause. Hope is an uncertain joy. Fear is an uncertain sadness. Envy, pride, humility, anger, gratitude, pity, repentance. These are not random storms. They have structures. They can be understood. Imagine a quiet lake at night. If you only see ripples, you might think the surface moves mysteriously. But if you learn about wind, stones, fish, currents, and the shape of the shore, the ripples become less mysterious. They may still move you. They may still be beautiful or troubling, but they are no longer pure confusion. Spinoza wants us to understand the emotions in this way, not to shame them, not to pretend we can become marble statues, not to scold ourselves for being human. He wants us to see how emotions arise, how they bind us, and how understanding can transform our relation to them. This is what he means by bondage to the passions. A passion, for Spinoza, is not simply a strong feeling. It is a state in which we are passive, acted upon by causes we do not adequately understand. When anger takes hold of us, when fear narrows the room, when jealousy paints the world in sharp colors, when sadness makes the future feel smaller, we are not fully acting from our own understanding. We are being carried. And everyone knows this, even without philosophy. We know what it feels like to be carried by a mood. We know what it feels like when a single message changes the temperature of the day. We know what it feels like when memory enters the room without knocking. We know what it feels like to say, "Why did I react like that?" Or, "Why do I keep returning to this thought?" Spinoza does not answer with blame. He answers with causality. Something caused this. And if something caused it, then perhaps it can be understood. And if it can be understood, then perhaps we do not have to be completely ruled by it. This is one of the most humane parts of his philosophy. He asks us to examine human actions as if we were studying lines, planes, or bodies. Not because people are cold objects, but because moral outrage often prevents understanding. We laugh, we weep, we condemn, he says in spirit, but the philosopher tries to understand. To understand is not to approve. This distinction matters. If someone harms another person, understanding the causes does not make the harm good, but it can loosen hatred's grip. It can help us respond more wisely. It can help us build better institutions. It can help us see that people are not little supernatural exceptions to nature. They are formed, pressured, damaged, strengthened, confused, and moved by causes. So freedom, for Spinoza, grows through understanding. The more adequate our ideas, the more we participate in our own activity. The more confused our ideas, the more we are tossed around by partial images, rumors, fears, and inherited fantasies. An adequate idea is not just a correct fact. It is a clear understanding of something through its causes. If I know that I am anxious, that is something. But if I begin to understand the bodily fatigue, the memory, the expectation, the social pressure, the uncertain future, and the old habit that compose this anxiety, then my mind becomes less trapped inside it. The anxiety may not vanish like smoke, but it becomes part of a pattern, and a pattern can be held more calmly than a monster. This is why Spinoza can be unexpectedly useful for a restless night. A restless mind often suffers not only from thoughts, but from thoughts without context. They arrive as absolute commands. You must solve this now. You must fear this now. You must replay this now. Spinoza's voice across time says something gentler and stranger. This too belongs to nature. This too has causes. This too can be understood. You are not outside the order of things, trying to hold the universe together with your jaw. There is a kind of mercy in that. Spinoza's God or nature does not intervene to rescue us from causality, but understanding causality can itself become a form of rescue. Not rescue as escape, rescue as perspective. The room widens. The feeling becomes one wave among many. The self becomes less like an isolated candle fighting the dark, and more like a flame participating in the whole movement of fire, air, wax, and night. Now, because Spinoza's philosophy is often summarized too quickly, it is worth pausing over what he does not mean. He does not mean that everything is morally wonderful. When he says that everything follows from God or nature, he is not saying that cruelty is good, or that suffering is secretly pleasant, or that nothing matters. He is saying that everything is intelligible as part of the order of nature. The task is not to pretend pain is not pain. The task is to understand pain without adding superstition, hatred, and confusion where clarity might help. He also does not mean that individual things are illusions. You are not unreal. The cup on the table is not unreal. The tired body is not unreal. A friendship, a wound, a city, a book, a bird, a childhood street, these are all real modes of substance. They are finite, dependent, changing, and temporary, but they are not nothing. In Spinoza, the temporary is not meaningless. It is one way eternity expresses itself in time. And he does not mean that wisdom makes us emotionless. The goal is not to become a stone, even though the stone has already been very useful to us tonight. The goal is to move from passive emotions to active emotions, from confused suffering to clearer joy, from being dominated by external causes to understanding ourselves as part of the whole. Joy matters deeply to Spinoza because joy is an increase in our power to exist and act. Wisdom is not grim. Wisdom is a deeper kind of aliveness. This brings us to one of the most famous and mysterious ideas in Spinoza, the intellectual love of God. At first, the phrase may sound cold and distant. Intellectual love. It seems almost like a contradiction. But for Spinoza, the highest form of love is not possession, dependency, flattery, or fear. It is the joy that arises from understanding reality. To know God or nature adequately, even in part, is to participate in a kind of eternal perspective. The mind sees itself and the world not as accidents abandoned in darkness, but as expressions of an infinite order. This love is not sentimental. It is not a soft focus painting of clouds. It is the peace that comes from seeing clearly. It is the calm joy of no longer demanding that the universe becomes smaller, more human, more flattering, or more obedient than it is. It is the love of reality as reality, not because reality always gives us what we want, but because understanding it brings the mind into harmony with what is. Spinoza's eternity is also unusual. He does not simply promise personal immortality in the familiar sense. He does not comfort us with the image of the same little ego continuing forever with its preferences, grudges, and furniture. Instead, he suggests that there is something eternal in the mind insofar as it understands things under the aspect of eternity. Subspecie eternitatis, under the aspect of eternity. To see something under the aspect of eternity is to see it not merely as this passing event, this insult, this success, this worry, this Tuesday, this small triumph, this small humiliation, but as part of the infinite order of nature. It is like climbing a hill above a town at night. Down in the streets, each window contains a whole world of urgency. But from above, the town becomes a pattern of lights, not meaningless, not erased, but held in a wider view. Spinoza's philosophy asks us, when we can, to climb that hill. Of course, we cannot live there all the time. We still need breakfast. We still misplace keys. We still get tired. We still want to be loved by particular people in particular rooms on particular afternoons. Spinoza knew this too. He was not writing for angels. He was writing for human beings who cough, worry, desire, misunderstand, and slowly learn. His political thought follows naturally from his view of human nature. If people are driven by affects, fears, desires, hopes, and imagination, then politics cannot be built on fantasies about perfect rational beings. A good political order must understand people as they are. It must reduce fear where possible, protect freedom of thought, and allow human beings to live together without tearing one another apart over every difference of belief. In his theological political treatise, Spinoza argued for freedom of philosophizing, freedom of expression, and a careful interpretation of Scripture. This book was controversial, even dangerous. It challenged religious authorities and political powers by suggesting that Scripture should be read historically, with attention to language, context, authorship, and purpose. Prophets, for Spinoza, were not philosophers delivering metaphysical systems. They were powerful moral imaginations speaking to particular people in particular times. Miracles, too, receive a Spinozist rethinking. For many, a miracle means a violation of nature's laws. For Spinoza, this makes no sense. Nature's order is God's order. To say that God violates nature would be like saying that reality interrupts itself. What people call miracles are events whose causes they do not understand. Wonder arises from ignorance, not because ignorance is shameful, but because the human mind is finite. We are always meeting things larger than our present understanding. This did not make Spinoza popular with authorities, but he was not simply attacking religion for the pleasure of it. He wanted to separate genuine piety and justice from superstition and fear. He thought the heart of religion, socially speaking, was not metaphysical speculation, but the practice of justice and charity. In other words, the point was not to win arguments about invisible structures while becoming cruel in visible life. This is still a rather useful thought. Spinoza also saw that fear is one of the great political emotions. People who are afraid are easier to control. They may surrender freedom for security. They may cling to superstition. They may turn against one another. They may mistake obedience for virtue and cruelty for strength. A freer society, for Spinoza, is not one in which everyone becomes perfectly wise. It is one in which institutions are arranged so that people can live, speak, think, and cooperate with less fear and more reason. He admired democracy because it seemed to him the most natural form of political order, the one most compatible with collective freedom. Not perfect, not magical, not immune to human folly, but closer to the idea that power should not be held as the private property of a few. A stable state does not require the silence of minds. It requires conditions under which minds can differ without destroying the common world. Meanwhile, Spinoza's personal life remained modest. He had friends and correspondents. He wrote letters to thinkers, scientists, and curious people across Europe. Some admired him, some challenged him, some misunderstood him. Some were fascinated and alarmed in equal measure. His philosophy traveled quietly before it traveled loudly. At one point, he was offered a university position at Heidelberg. This could have given him security and status, but he refused. He worried that accepting the post might limit his freedom to philosophize. There is something deeply Spinozist in that refusal. He did not seem to want a life decorated by approval if approval came at the cost of thought. This does not mean he was without fear. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the ability to be guided by something deeper than fear. Spinoza's life suggests a quiet courage, not the courage of armies, crowns, or speeches, but the courage of staying near the truth as one sees it, even when the room grows colder. He lived in several places in the Dutch Republic, including Rijnsburg, Voorburg, and finally The Hague. He wrote, worked, corresponded, and continued polishing the ethics. He did not publish the ethics during his lifetime, likely because he knew how explosive it would be. After his death in 1677, his friends arranged for his works to be published. Even then, his books were dangerous. They were banned, denounced, hidden, circulated, and whispered about. Spinoza died young at 44. His lungs were weak, perhaps damaged by years of glass dust from lens grinding. We can imagine the room at The Hague, the quietness of a life ending without grand ceremony. A body stops breathing. A few friends remember. Papers remain. And then the strange afterlife begins. For a long time, Spinoza was treated as a scandal. His name became a warning. To call someone a Spinozist could mean atheist, heretic, dangerous thinker, dissolver of morality, enemy of religion. Yet slowly, across the centuries, readers returned to him. German idealists wrestled with him. Romantics admired him. Scientists found in him a vision of nature without superstition. Political thinkers saw his defense of freedom. Modern philosophers saw in him a radical alternative to mind-body dualism. Even Einstein famously expressed sympathy with something like Spinoza's God, not a personal deity concerned with human affairs, but the rational order and mystery of existence. Spinoza became, in time, not less strange, but differently strange. The scandal softened into depth. The heretic became a classic. The lonely lens grinder became one of the great minds of modern philosophy. And what can Spinoza offer a restless night? Perhaps first, he offers the thought that you are not an isolated mistake. You are part of nature. Your body, your thoughts, your fears, your desires, your memories, your fatigue, your tenderness, your strange little worries at midnight. None of these place you outside the universe. They are movements within it. Second, he offers the dignity of understanding. To understand a feeling is not to erase it. It is to give it edges. It is to place a lamp beside it. Fear in darkness becomes larger than fear in light. Sadness without context becomes a weather system with no map. But when the mind begins to see causes, relations, patterns, and conditions, it becomes more active. Even a small understanding can be a small freedom. Third, he offers a calmer relation to reality. Much of suffering comes not only from what happens, but from our demand that reality should have happened otherwise, that the past should be rewritten, that other people should have been made differently, that the whole order of things should bend around our private script. Spinoza does not mock this wish. He simply guides us slowly toward the possibility of releasing it. What has happened has causes. What exists belongs to the order of nature. We can act, learn, repair, protect, and seek joy, but we do not have to add the extra suffering of believing the universe has personally insulted us. Fourth, he offers a vision of joy that is not shallow. Joy is not mere distraction. Joy is the increase of our power to exist and act. A clearer mind, a healthier body, a true friendship, a generous action, a beautiful piece of music, a solved problem, a morning walk, a good meal, a page understood after difficulty. These are not trivial. They are ways the power of life rises in us. And fifth, he offers the aspect of eternity, not as an escape from ordinary life, but as a wider view. The worry that feels enormous tonight may one day become one light among many on the hillside. The self that feels so burdened may be understood as part of a larger order. The present moment, with all its aches and unfinished business, may loosen slightly when held against the silent depth of nature. So if you are still awake, you might imagine Spinoza sitting at his table. There is glass dust in the room, though we will keep it gentle and harmless in the imagination. There are papers nearby. Outside, perhaps rain moves softly along the street. A canal darkens under evening. Somewhere a door closes. Somewhere a ship creaks. Somewhere a person worries about money, love, health, reputation, dinner, God, tomorrow. And Spinoza, quietly, keeps polishing. He polishes the lens. He polishes the thought. He removes distortion where he can. He does not finish the universe. No one does. But he tries to see it more clearly. Maybe that is enough for one night. To see a little more clearly. To hate a little less blindly. To fear a little less absolutely. To understand that desire has causes, sadness has causes, anger has causes, and even confusion is not a monster from nowhere, but part of nature asking to be understood. And so, for tonight, we can leave Spinoza here, not finished, because no good story is ever truly finished, but gently folded like a blanket at the foot of the bed. There are more names, more routes, more rooms, more arguments, and more quiet discoveries than any single night can hold. What matters is not that you remember every detail. What matters is that the mind has been given something calm to follow, something broad enough to wander through and soft enough to release. The past can be a storm when told loudly, but it can also be a lantern when held with care. So let the remaining images drift away. The roads, the lamps, the windows, the hands, the old stones, the distant water, the patient sky. Let them become simple shapes in the dark. And if sleep is near, you do not need to chase the ending. You may simply let the story continue without you, somewhere beyond the edge of waking.